It is a Wednesday, Where Are They Now episode. Today, we're going to talk about the Preds players that have recently departed the team and what their performances in a new place can tell us about Nashville.
You're Locked On Predators, your daily podcast on the Nashville Predators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Wednesday, everybody. Welcome to the Locked On Predators podcast. Thanks for making us your first listen of the day. We are, of course, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to kick off our Wednesday episode shouting out our Locked On Predators insiders and our everydayers who tune in to talk Nashville Predators hockey with us. I'm Ann Kimmel. I am a writer and co-host with Penalty Box Radio, and friends, I have a partner in crime.
That you do. I am Emma Lingan, and I'm an NHL reporter and host with the Hockey News.
On today's show, Emma and I are going to take a look back at the Nashville Predators players who have departed the roster in recent seasons. It's a where are they now kind of episode. We're going to talk about how these players performed with new teams in new circumstances, what Nashville Predators fans can take away from that information, and we're going to weigh in on whether we think Barry Trotz made the right moves at the right time. Before we dive into that hot topic, we do want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. All right, Emma, I have to tell you, prepping for this episode was like a time warp for me. I literally, look, I pride myself. I don't like math, but I pride myself on getting my statistics right. And I triple checked, quadruple checked, and then asked Emma before we recorded, Emma, is it factual information that Gus Nyquist was on the roster last season? Because I literally have no recollection of that. Because last season did something to us. He was, friends. He was.
I mean, that's what happens when the season is 84 years long. I mean, you lose, some things just fall through the cracks there.
Yeah, I was like, there is no way that Gus Nyquist played here last season. But if you go back to like year 2 of the 84 years, you will find that Gus Nyquist was on the roster and he didn't stay there clearly, but I'm telling you that prepping for this episode, I was like, I hardly remember this. And I don't think that that's a statement about myself and my memory issues. I think it's a statement about what the flag nog happened last season to this Predators team and this roster, because like friends, we got a lot of players to talk about. We had to like leave some out.
Yeah, I mean, last season alone, I even got to a point where I forgot that Luke Shen was on the roster last year.
Yes.
Tommy Novak, Alex Carrier. Like,
Yeah.
it's like, surely. No.
Surely.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Scott
Over the
Wedgwood.
last. Oh, I vaguely remember him, but only because he liked my outfit one night.
Yes.
And he will remain a favorite of mine because of that from thence on, friends. Yeah.
Yes.
The last 2 seasons, as you look at the turnover in the roster over the last 2 seasons under Barry Trotz, his official reign as general manager with Andrew Brunette as the coach, it is a sight to see laid out on paper, friends. And I'm not saying, look, oh my gosh, if we had kept all of these players, the Predators would be a contender. But it is a very fascinating turnover, which shouldn't be super surprising, Emma, because most of these players, these were not Barry Trotz's guys. While Barry Trotz worked closely with David Poile in the transition, and of course they have a longstanding relationship as coach and GM from way back in the day, Barry Trotz came in with a little bit of a different vision. And when that happens, a lot of times you do have this kind of turnover. So it shouldn't be surprising. And I don't think it would be as shocking to see it laid out if there had been a modicum of consistent success that went along with some of this turnover. But, that's not what we saw.
Sure wasn't.
No,
Sure wasn't.
no. So I wanted to start with some of the peripheral players who still generate some conversation, Emma. And I'm talking about players like Phil Tomasino. You mentioned Tommy Novak, Juuso Parssinen. Do you remember a guy named Igor Afanasiev? Do you remember him? And he was going to save the franchise. Do you remember that?
Vaguely. I almost forgot about Juuso Parssinen. And that was more recent.
I
So
know. Well, in our defense, he has been on 3 teams last season. So even he is probably like, where am I? What is going on? But you look at these players who have departed. Let's throw in Cody Glass, just for poops and snorts. Let's throw in Cody Glass here too. And what the heck happened that Nashville punted on players? And again, let's remember, like, of all of these players, Cody Glass was the highest. He was a first round pick, and I can't remember, what was he, 11th? I'm just thinking that off the top of my head. I don't remember what number player he was, but he was a high first round pick. Might have been higher than that for the Vegas Golden Knights. Tomasino was a first round pick, 24th overall, so lower first round. Novak, third round. Afanasiev was a second round pick. Parssinen, 7th round pick. Let's hear it for the Aiden Fink round. Don't just count them. But when you look at these players,
Cody Glass was drafted 6th, by the way. That was going to bother me if I didn't look it up
it was
just now. So
especially because I was like, I like to get my stats right, and then I'm 5 off. Work with me, people. It's the off season, and it's been 84 years, and I bet not a one of you can even picture his face anymore. But when you think about those players, who is the player that you're like, you know what, that player moved on and made a big splash in their next stop after they were traded from the Predators? Is there anyone that you're like, damn?
no.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, friends.
I mean, and that's the thing, is that everyone likes to take these things that happen and kind of massage them to fit the narrative of, well, the Predators can't develop or they, not that they can't develop, but like they give up. Well, maybe it is that they can't develop, but they can't develop forwards. They give up too quickly on these great franchise saving players, and now they're gonna go on and make, I'm sorry, who which one? Ellie Tolvanen had one good season, sort of, with Seattle, and then
we're still paying for that here, Ellie Tolvanen. Thanks.
And he just kind of like neutralized back to a perfectly fine middle 6 winger. Like, I mean, again, a lot of these guys, it's like everyone talks about, they just, Predators fans, they vilify whether it's David Poile or Barry Trotz for letting these players go. They're the ones that got away. And it's like, are they? Are they?
Yeah.
Because I think that a lot of these, like the ones that you just mentioned, it's kind of vindicating a little bit to look at, what they've done with their next teams. Now, Ellie Tolvanen, like I said, fine. Cody Glass has been fine. Again, it's not like any of them just went somewhere else and completely just popped off and had this like revenge tour. It's just like, it just hasn't happened.
One of the things you always have to weigh when you jettison players is what you get back in return. And that's a different way to weigh the success of moving on from a player. Coming up, we'll talk a little bit about returns for some of these players. We're also going to talk about the blue line. Nashville moved on from a handful of defenders last season. We're going to talk about what those losses cost Nashville on defense and what role players Nashville may miss the most going forward. Today's episode is brought to you by our great friends at GameTime. Friends, we have all been there, logging on early and waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show you have been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That is where GameTime comes in. GameTime makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, and you can save up up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. Do you ever wonder what your view will actually look like before you buy? This app was going to show you a panoramic seat view, so there are no surprises. With GameTime, the price you see is the price you pay. No hidden fees. Worried about what happens if your plans suddenly change? The GameTime guarantee has your back with cancellation protection and more. So take the guesswork out of buying concert and show tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download the GameTime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, Emma, talking about players that have left Nashville, it can get a little frustrating when you see the turnover written down. And again, we talked about that happens as you're changing GMs, as you bring in a different coach. There's kind of always a little bit of shuffling to do. One of the things that I think should make Nashville Predators fans feel a little bit better is that Nashville has gotten some fair returns on jettisoning some of these players. And the one that I am most excited about is Michael Bunting. And I know he's not glamorous, perhaps, but I think Michael Bunting makes the Nashville Predators better, incrementally better. I mean, let's not put it all on Michael Bunting. He is a human being, friends, and we all saw what last season was like. But Michael Bunting is somebody who makes this roster better by being a role player for this team. And I think when you move on from a Tommy Novak, who you had high expectations for, and they didn't quite pan out for various reasons, there is a little bit of comfort in, okay, but we got in return somebody who is a role player for the Nashville Predators as well. So while there's disappointment that some of these players didn't pan out, you also have to weigh the upside of the return on all of this turnover.
Yeah, and I think, like with a lot of these younger players in particular that was supposed to, the guys who were going to save the franchise, save the future of the Predators, it was like, okay, not saying that they for sure weren't going to, but I mean, imagine whatever disappointment about losing them or seeing them be successful with other teams, that disappointment would have increased tenfold if they had stayed in Nashville and never reached whatever, fans had deemed to be their full potential or their ceiling or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, again, it didn't happen. It didn't work out. And sometimes it's just a mismatch of player and franchise, like, and where that franchise is and their timeline. And that's okay. It doesn't necessarily mean, oh, it's a bad player or whatever. I mean, the timing's got to be right, just like in relationships, right? Like, timing is everything. Like, it really does matter. So I think that, that's a big part of it as well. But yeah, like getting returns. I mean, you get Michael Bunting, you get Ozzy Weisblatt out of it. I mean, and then you get draft picks, of course, and those draft picks are going to turn into, pieces as well. And in some of these moves, honestly, like, the biggest return that you get is cap space too. I mean, we look at, trading Alex Carrier, what that did. And I think that it, like, at the end of the day, not saying that Alex Carrier was a massive just drain on the salary cap, but more just saying that, like, it gives you more flexibility. If you're Barry Trotz, it gives you more flexibility. Not that they have anyone right now that's like coming up on a huge contract year, but like, even with, whatever they might decide to do, whether it's, they get into the season and they need to start selling because it's just gone horribly wrong, or if they get to the trade deadline and they're like, oh, we might actually have a shot at this thing, let's go buy. Like, they have flexibility to do that now.
Yeah. And all of that matters. It might not be splashy and flashy, but all of that matters. Talking about the defense, of course, you mentioned Alexandre Carrier, the Viscount Chihuahua, as we lovingly and refer to him, and don't tell anybody we ever said that. But you look at Luke Shen. Do you remember Luke Shen used to play here? Do you remember that?
Vaguely.
Big guy skates a
Very
little
big
bit
guy.
slow. Yeah, very big guy skates a little bit slow. But you look at the defensive pieces that have gone now, and it's hard to sort through this past season because so much of the defense was just injury ridden as well. So it's very hard to take much away defensively, but you look at some of the moves that Barry Trotz has made, Alexandre Carrier, after the season, of course, we have Jeremy Lauzon and Colton Sissons are going to Vegas, swapping out some defensemen there. You have, like we mentioned, Luke Shen gone. You have these players gone, and you don't get a huge return. What I think is so interesting is those players like Alexandre Carrier is in a very similar role in a lot of ways. He's playing, top 4 minutes in Montreal. But again, it comes down to role and opportunity. And, Carrier and Lauzon was a pretty, we always knew is like peanut butter and jelly. Like you knew when one was out there, the other one was out there as well. I think it's a different role and opportunity for Alexandre Carrier. It'll be interesting to see what a player like Carrier does. It will be interesting to see how does a team like Vegas use a Jeremy Lauzon, because what you have to remember is that other teams are looking at some of these Nashville players that fans are like, we got to have this guy. And they're thinking, we're going to put that guy in a totally different role. And maybe then they are successful. And it doesn't always have to be an elevated role. It could be a smaller role, but they could be more successful in that. So I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens with some of these defensemen long-term that Nashville's parted ways with. It's also going to be interesting to see what happens with the defenseman Nashville has brought in, because when we talk about the Nick squared, those are two defensemen that this is a different role and a different opportunity for Nashville as well.
Yeah, no, very good point about the roles and the opportunities. I mean, again, even when talking about Phil Tomasino earlier, like having the opportunity to play on a role with or play on a line with Evgeny Malkin, like that's a different kind of opportunity, and you just see what you're going to get from it. But I think that it is very important, and like you said, it goes both ways. So we can't just assume, like we can assume, okay, the plan here for Nashville is to put Nick Hague with Roman Josi. We can assume that that's the plan, but we can't assume that it's going to work, or at least work right away. And same goes the other way. I mean, again, talking about Alex Carrier is a great example. I mean, he goes to Montreal and he's not young, friends. He's what, 27, 28? He goes to Montreal and he's like the grizzled old veteran there. Like he gets to give them some veteran stability on their blue line, which is never a role that he was going to get to play in Nashville, but just because of the nature of the roster. And that's not good or bad, objectively speaking. It's just different. He gives them a little bit more stability, and, gets that consistent top 4 opportunity there. So I don't know. It all, none of this stuff happens in a vacuum, and it all just depends on circumstances.
Yeah. And a player who is of high value here in Nashville may thrive in a maybe lower spotlight role somewhere else. And that's okay. That's okay. A lot of it comes down to like role, opportunity, and how do you utilize these players? And that I think is a broader conversation when it comes to the Nashville Predators as well. Coming up, we're going to talk about one player who, even more than Phil Tomasino, even more than Igor Afanasyev, this guy generates so much conversation when it comes to not re-signing him. We are going to talk about Kiefer Sherwood. We're also going to talk about what all of these dearly departed players tell us about how Nashville utilizes talent. All right, Emma, if you have been, listening to a lot of conversations, looking at comments, reading things online, social media, Kiefer Sherwood is the lightning rod, my friend. Who would have thunk it? First of all, let's say this. Kiefer Sherwood, delightful. Miss him in the locker room. I think he is so delightful. Filthy mouth on the ice from what he even admits to, but, very polite to us. Of course, he was a UFA. opted to sign with Vancouver, a 2-year, $3 million deal. And then he goes to Vancouver, and last season played 78 games, 19 goals, 40 points, power play time, a career high season. And the gnashing and weeping here in Nashville is deafening, my friends, because if we had kept Kiefer Sherwood, last season would have been so different, Emma. Or would it?
See, the
Girl.
straws that some of these people grasp for when things don't go their way. It's hilarious. Like, again, nothing against Kiefer Sherwood. We love Kiefer Sherwood here.
Love him.
I still think, and have always thought that he's an underrated player.
Yes.
Or he was underrated. I think he got to Vancouver and he got to play in a different kind of role, which is a perfect example of what we were talking about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
If he had stayed in Nashville, he was not playing above the fourth line. Good, bad, whatever, however you feel about that, that's just not what was going to happen, because they had other players at the time, other players who, if you had looked at the roster, you wouldn't say, like, you know what, we're going to elevate Kiefer Sherwood so we can put Luke Evangelista on the fourth line. That's what we're going to do. And like, that's what would have had to happen. And so I think that that's just kind of how you have to look at it, because people are, oh my God, he goes to Vancouver and he just has this career season, and oh, how we would just be so different as a team in Nashville if we had kept Kiefer Sherwood. Again, of all people. He played a completely different role in Vancouver. He played a different role. Now, again, that is one of the reasons that I think he is an underrated player, undervalued player, is because he can sort of chameleon like that, and he can play those different kinds of roles. But, and then he goes and he breaks the hit record set by Jeremy Lauzon the year before, and it's like, oh my God. And it's like, okay, but also, like, Vancouver didn't make the playoffs. Like, he didn't win any awards. I'm not trying to make
it's
this,
not about being critical about Kiefer Sherwood. It's about, let's look at this situation from a realistic standpoint.
Let's look at this from the big picture. If Kiefer Sherwood, if all else being equal, if Kiefer Sherwood had stayed in Nashville, this isn't a playoff team. Like, it's still like his presence is not what pushes this team over the edge. No one's gonna look at a roster with Steven freaking Stamkos and Philip Forsberg and Jonathan Marchessault on it and be like, you know what that needs? It needs a little Kiefer Sherwood. No.
Yes, Kiefer Sherwood was not going to unlock Steven Stamkos. He was not going to off-ice therapy and on-ice unlock Steven Stamkos last season. Now, again, not taking anything away from him, and I think this is a great example of Kiefer Sherwood was very, very smart with the market. He found a place that loved his game and also gave him an opportunity to play up in the lineup. Good on Kiefer Sherwood.
And that's the other thing too. He got paid. Now, 2 years, $3 million does not sound like a lot. Nashville was not giving him that. He was making barely more than league minimum, I think, with Nashville. They would have had to essentially double his salary, double what they were paying him to match what he made in Vancouver. They weren't going to do that. And that's valid, I think. I think it was very wise by him.
Yeah, I do too. I'm like, good on you. Miss him in the locker room, but good on you for reading the market.
Get your bag, man.
Get your bag. Get your opportunity in that. You go. Love that. Miss him, but love that for him. The other thing people say is like, nobody played like Kiefer Sherwood. I would like to introduce you to a much more affordable guy whose name is Ozzy Weisblatt. Like, I would like you to meet Ozzy Weisblatt. Very affordable. Now, Ozzy Weisblatt is not going to score 19 goals, but Kiefer Sherwood wasn't going to score 19 goals on the fourth line with the Nashville Predators last season if he had stayed. So I think we all have to understand that there is not one player you're going to bring in or lose that is going to have unlocked what happened over the last 2 seasons. This is not a one player broke it. This is, I mean, we're talking, we got a lot more going on here in Nashville than that. When I look at these players that have departed, and like I said, we've not even talked about all of them because who has time? But one of the things that I realize and I recognize and that makes me go, is that Nashville banks on almost lightning in a bottle in some ways. And I think of a Gus Nyquist, older veteran coming in. His season in 2023-24, when he was with Ryan O'Reilly and he was one of the Swedish meatballs, lightning in a bottle. I mean, he had career high in assists, in points. He was everywhere. He was on fire. And he has not replicated that with Minnesota. He just signed with the Winnipeg Jets. So it'll be interesting to see how they utilize him. But Nashville banks on finding the hidden gem. And I think sometimes it hits, like it hit that season with Gus Nyquist. But I think a lot of times it doesn't. And it may, I don't know, Emma, something about looking at all of this on paper, and some of them were draft picks. And again, remember, Nashville has averaged 20th overall draft pick over the last decade. So we're not picking high, in the first round. But it's like Barry Trotz, that swing, take a big swing. I think sometimes I would like him to bunt and just get to first base. Now, I'm not a big baseball fan, so I don't know if that analogy really filters out with my baseball expert, but just maybe bunt and get to first.
Yeah, like it doesn't have to be pretty. You can play small ball. You don't have to swing for the fences every time. And I think when you talk about like lightning in a bottle, that entire season was lightning in a bottle for the Nashville Predators. I mean, they had to go on a, historic streak in the second half to even get a wild card spot, because otherwise that was not, and that's great, but that's not what anyone would call like a recipe for consistent success. You shouldn't have had to do that in the first place. And so yes, like it's great when it happens and things happen. I mean, like look at the Washington Capitals this past year. Ovechkin is Ovechkin. But if you look at some of the guys that they signed, no one would have expected Jacob Chikrin to just be like the godsend that they needed in Washington. Or, a lot of these other guys that they signed, they were like, fine, but it's like, they just it worked all at the right time. The stars aligned. And you know what? That happens sometimes. And it happened with Nashville a little bit with that, the Swedish meatball line. And so I think that now, side note, it'll be interesting because I do think that Winnipeg's banking on that a little bit with Gus Nyquist, because they lost Nikolai Ehlers. And they're like, who are we going to sign? Gus Nyquist. I'm sorry, Gus, but
okay.
No.
We'll see how that pans out.
Yeah, so I think that it's just like you have to I do think Nashville does it. But my point is, I don't think they're the only team that does it. But the point is, you can't do it consistently, no matter who you are, and just duct tape and dream your way to the playoffs every year, because it's like, you have to have a little more strategy than that. And I think they do. But I think it's like it's not even just what the team is doing, is what the fans are doing, is looking at everything as like, okay, best case scenario is this. And anything short of the absolute best case scenario is a complete and utter failure. Well, I have news for you. That's life. I don't know what to tell you. So, I mean, like, I get it. I really do. I get the tendency, but like, you can't always think about everything as it's got to be the best case scenario. And if it's not, well, then it's a complete failure. because then you're
Yeah.
just setting yourself up for disappointment.
I think that is so true. That's kind of another takeaway for me is that, you tend to bank on everybody hitting their ceiling at the same time. And you have to have an element of that happen if you want to win the Stanley Cup. There is an element of everybody is playing at their ceiling. Top line, fourth line, third pairing defenseman, backup goaltender, everybody. There is an element of everybody has to hit their ceiling, but you also need a roster where there are enough players whose ceiling is consistently hit. And sometimes I think Nashville banks on players who aren't consistent ceiling hitters. That's a little unnerving to me.
Yeah.
Well, on that cheery note, friends. I wish I could wrap that up in a bow, but I do think that that's something that you really have to look at when it comes to roster construction. Part of that is circumstantial, and then you have to weigh out like how much of that has to do with draft picks and this and that. And, you get off in the jingweeds about that, but there is an element of everybody has to hit their ceiling. Friends, last season is what it looks like when no one hits their ceiling, except Philip Forsberg was, right on his average. But last season this is what it looks like when no one hits their ceiling. It is not fun. You forget Gus Nyquist in those circumstances. It's not great. This season, players have to hit their ceiling. At least the big guys. They got to hit their ceiling, Emma.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're going to. That's another podcast for another day. What's it going to take to hit their ceiling? That is something that we are going to wrestle with next week. Next week, we're going to kick off a series, 3 questions about. We're going to be talking about the general manager, the coach, and some of the players on the team. So join us for that coming up. We are going to wrap up this episode. Let us know, who is the player that you think got away? Do you really think that there is a player that left Nashville that could have changed the trajectory of this team last season? We're curious to get your thoughts on that. You can leave us a comment on this YouTube video. You can find us on social media at LO_Predators as well. Emma, before we officially log off and go back and look at photographs of Gus Nyquist, just to remember, he was here last season, you all. Will you let everyone know where they can find you and your work?
You can find me on social media at Emma_Lingan, and you can find my work at the Hockey News.
You can find me on social media at AnnK_Mama on Ice. You can find my work with Penalty Box Radio as well. Friends, that's going to do it for today's episode of the Locked On Predators podcast. Thanks again for making us your first listen of the day. We hope you have a fabulous Wednesday. We'll see you here Friday.